How the Russia-Ukraine crisis can impact your finances.
Yeah, Brian, I'm excited about this show today because I think this is on a lot of folks' minds. I mean, obviously, in the world right now, this is sort of an issue going on that cannot be avoided. So it likely is going to have an impact on us. And I think a lot of people want to know is, how does this impact my finances? How does this impact my portfolio?
Well, look, you can tell by the title of our show, The Money Guy Show, we are not geopolitical experts.
Sure.
And we're even very purposeful in the fact that we don't do religion, we do not do politics, because those things are so divisive. And then, but every now and then, this stuff just swerves right into to us, and it's one of those things where I want to make sure that our audience, because it's things that create anxiety. They're front and center where you can't get away from it. And if you're not equipped to know how to deal with this for your own personal finances, it can really derail you from accomplishing a lot of your goals and staying on point and on purpose with how your money works. And then it also sometimes even feels weird to talk about your personal finances when we're dealing with something that globally, I mean, it's scary, it's sad, there's human cost to this, but it is one of those things where I think that there needs to be a voice to talk about these things. So even though we're not experts in the geopolitical world, we are experts in the financial realm, and we're going to try to help you navigate that.
And, obviously what we do in our day jobs is we help folks navigate their financial lives. We get to serve as fee-only financial advisors, and a lot of the folks that we work with are retired, and they're living off of their portfolios. They've built their army of dollar bills, and so we've been fielding questions and emails and phone calls around folks saying, okay, hey, what does this mean? How does this impact me? How should I be thinking about this? And we can see very clearly here in the first few months of 2022, we've seen some volatility. Obviously, the geopolitical events that are taking place are affecting our markets, and it has introduced some volatility into the markets that really, I guess we saw it in the pandemic, but this is different, right? This is sort of conflict habituated. It's different than we saw in the global pandemic. So it's a unique time for a lot of investors.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't mean to be the emotional player here, but I think sometimes people come because I'm the older of the two of us, I guess, if you're trying to put things, so there's some life experience there. And I've often internalized the fact of when we have these type of things happen, I think one of the reasons it also bothers you so much is that you can't turn on the news without seeing a building get blown up, or you see a family that's freaking out because a plane flew over shooting missiles. I mean, this stuff is just horrible. And this is why during these times, I want you to take care of yourself. I actually read more of my news than I watch my news when I enter these periods, because I know just what a anxiety toll it can take. But also I think it's important to let's focus, Bo, on the perspective of what actually has happened so far this year in finances. We can go through all the different asset classes, and then let's talk about even taking a bigger view of what's happened historically.
Yeah, so when we look at a number of the different asset classes that we follow, you can see, again, it's been a pretty volatile year so far. If we look at domestic equities, domestic companies here in the United States, year to date, and this is through February 28th, large cap holdings are down about 8.6%, mid cap are down about 6.4%, small cap are down about 7%. And then even on the international side, foreign large cap developed stocks are down about 7.5%. Emerging markets are down 5%. And you can see, other than really two sort of asset classes right there, energy and precious metals, which we can talk a little bit about, most everything is down this year. And so one of the questions I think a lot of folks are asked is, oh man, this feels unique. It's different than 2021. It's different than what I've been feeling. Should I be making changes? Does it, is the way the market has performed thus far an indication I should be changing things, moving things around, making adjustments, reacting to what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, this Look, I mean, this chart says a lot, Bo. You can see everything is down except for energy's up 20% and precious metals are up 6%. But that by itself is a fear gauge.
For sure.
Because what happens when people are panicked is they immediately say, let's go buy the gold. Let's head for the hills and go buy the gold. And then energy, of course, it's up 20% right now because lots of disruptions going on in that field. But this is where I do want to remind everybody, you're a financial mutant. If you're watching this show, you're a financial mutant, and we're experiencing destruction. We're experiencing things that are scary. But remember, I think all financial mutants are naturally builders. So I want to give you perspective, and we have one more indicator to kind of study, but I'm going to have a payoff. So if you will stick with us, you will see why this is important to have this builder mentality, because that is a natural human nature. Just like fear is natural, the desire for humans to continue to build and grow is also a natural thing. But let's actually look at, there is an indicator of how much uncertainty is out there right now. I think we've actually done a good job of trying to find a resource.
Yeah, I think what's really, really interesting is that as it relates to market volatility, this is not the first time that we've seen this. It's not the first time we've been there. And so we went and pulled and looked at the U.S. Economic Policy Uncertainty Index as measured by policyuncertainty.com. And it goes all the way back to 1985. So you can see significant events that the markets or that have been affected by uncertainty here in the U.S. and Black Monday, the Gulf War, 9/11, the global financial crisis, Russia invading Crimea a number of years ago, and then even the global pandemic. Uncertainty is a certainty when it comes to investing, when it comes to financial markets. And we've seen this over and over and over the past, 35 years. Is that good math there? And I don't know that it's something that will change.
Yeah, I think that this is why I love that history can be an educator for us, because it gives us perspective, is because, just as Bo said, these are key indicators where every one of the red lines that Daniel created for us between the Gulf War, 9/11, the pandemic, these things grip and rip through our emotions. But if you can, like I said, span out to take the 30,000 foot view, there is an overlay that I had, Daniel, because I see this all over social media, that chart. But then if you overlay this with the S&P 500 during the exact same period of time, I want you to know there's some interesting things. First of all, like the first one on here is Black Monday. And we've all heard about Black Monday from 1987. Market had a huge crush where I think it lost, was it 26%? It was a big day where the market. But what's funny is when you look at it in a historical context, yes, you can see where the market fell that day, but it almost looks like a little molehill that, it was a pothole. We're here in Tennessee right now because the cold weather has come. We've had rain and it's just wreaked havoc on our roads right now. It looks like a pothole formed in 1987. But while we were in the middle of it, it felt pretty horrible. And the same thing, Gulf War, 9/11, you can see these things, uncertainty index spiked up tremendously. You even see the market fell down in a temporary fashion. But in the background, and I've talked about this, and I know a lot of you are probably brand new, so I'm going to repeat it. I want you to know, in the short term, investing can feel like have a yo-yo. You're throwing that yo-yo up and down, and your emotions are just freaking out because every day it seems like there's a new headline. Every day there seems like there's another thing that's creating anxiety, up and down. But then when you go out over the long term, you realize, yes, it is a yo-yo, but it's a yo-yo that is happening while you walk up a mountain, a never-ending mountain. So you keep walking higher and higher. Yes, that market's going up and down, but you're on higher elevation, so that when you look at this over the long term, it doesn't matter that the market's going up and down in the short term, because you're so much higher when you look back 20 and 30 years in the past. And that's exactly what this chart shows. It's going to show, and I don't know how this is going to play out with Russia and the Ukraine. And it's just, and that's what I'm saying. We don't get into the geopolitical, but I do know when we scope out 20 years in the future, humans are going to continue to grow the economy. We're still going to have innovation. We're going to have more technology developments. There's going to be ways that you're going to see the markets and the system continue to expand, and it too will absorb all this uncertainty that we're experiencing.
So we keep fielding this question from clients and then from a number of you out in the audience. And okay, guys, well, what should I be changing? What should be happening? What should I be thinking through? And we try to remind our clients specifically that when it comes to portfolio design, when it comes to asset allocation, when it comes to really a well thought out financial plan, a good plan should be solid before volatility rears its head. It should remain solid while volatility is happening, and it should still be solid after the volatility has passed. So if you are someone out there and you're kind of watching your accounts, you're watching what's happening with your portfolio, and you're seeing these wild undulations, the first question I would ask is, did you have a plan? Did you have a well thought out plan going into this? Because what we have found is the folks who understand that on the front end are conditioned to weather this so much better. And I love that we have the live chat going right now. Someone said in here, focus on what you can control.
Exactly.
We don't get to control what's going on geopolitically, and we really don't get to control how the market reacts to that. But there are some things that we can control. There are some things that we can focus on to make sure that that plan that was good continues to stay good no matter what the markets or what the world throws at us.
So let's triage this. Let's actually put some steps to it. The first thing I want you to focus on in your plan is if you are panicked right now, let's focus on risk. And the first part of that risk is, what does your emergency reserves look like? Because that's the biggest thing. And y'all know I've talked about how volatility, market volatility, is an extrovert. It will be hanging out with, as we're seeing right now, conflict/wars. It's going to hang out with housing crashes. It's going to hang out with unemployment. You're going to see these type of things where we have volatility. It doesn't happen where one bad thing is going on at a time. It's where they all pile in together. So the first way to protect yourself is to make sure you have emergency reserves. And this is perfect to give people an understanding, because I hear so many people out there in the world, and I see them on Twitter, where they're saying, I'm not going to have a cash reserves. I'm going to make it to $1 million without cash reserves. And that sounds so great when you go through 2020 where the market made over 20%. You make it through 2021 where the market makes it over 20%. You're thinking, man, this tree's growing to heaven. So why not? Why do I even need cash? And then all of a sudden we go underwater and we have volatility. And you realize, just like oxygen, you've taken this for granted way too long, and it's not something that you should just say, hey, yeah, I know cash is paying less than 1%. You need cash reserves so you make it through these uncertain periods. Don't take that for granted. Now, look, Bo showed you. Year to date, the market is down about 8%.
Sure.
This is a great time. If you don't have cash reserves, but you've loaded up all these investment accounts and other things, go figure out how you can harness having enough cash reserves so that if you lost your job or you had some other hardship come your way, that you're going to be okay, and don't get yourself in this situation again in the future.
And keep in mind that cash reserve changes based on your life cycle. So oftentimes we cite 3 to 6 months is what you ought to have an emergency reserve. Well, what's going on right now in the markets is a great example of why we recommend for our retirees, for those that are financially independent, for those that are living off their army of dollar bills, we don't just want you to have 3 to 6 months of emergency reserves on hand. We want you to have that 12 to 18 months, because we don't know how long conflict or crisis will last. We don't know how long volatility will take place. But if you have cash that you can live off of, and you don't have to pull those dollars out of your portfolio prematurely, you give them time to recover. So make sure you're assessing where you are in your life cycle. Do I have the appropriate amount of cash reserves on the sidelines?
Now, Bo, you said it best. You said a good plan is going to be good before crisis hits. It's going to be good during the crisis. It's even going to be good after. And when you talk about that, that's really asset allocation.
That's exactly right.
You got to make sure that you have the right mix that reflects your goals, your age, your temperament towards risk in general. And that stuff, this is still a good time to kind of reassess that, do the measure twice, cut once on making sure you have that plan that reflects the asset allocation of somebody who is in your financial situation and where you want to be.
And this is a great reminder to us, because a number of folks because the markets have done so well over the past couple of years, have allowed themselves to get too far out on the risk curve. They say, I don't want to hold any bonds. I don't want to hold any fixed income. I don't want to have any diversification. I don't want to fill in the blank. These uncertain, unknown, surprising times remind us of why we stick to those tried and true things that we know work over the long term. So perhaps you are someone who lets your equity side of your portfolio run rampant. Maybe you are a little too further out on the risk curve. I would argue right now is probably a pretty decent time to rethink about that and see if you need to make some portfolio adjustments.
So we talked about focusing on the risk, creating a plan. I want to kind of pivot and talk about what are the tools we have to deal with this, because there actually are some planning opportunities that could come your way. The first one, and we've talked about this before, is loss harvesting. Bo, this is something we do it for our clients. We do it for ourselves. I placed my own trades last week where I locked in some losses on my taxable portfolio. Now, a lot of you are like, wait a minute, you're creating paper losses while markets are down, but you just told me markets typically in the long term are going to quickly recover from this. Why lock in a paper loss? And here's the why, guys, is that when you lock in that paper loss, we're going to be able to take to offset any gains that we have for the remainder of the year. So year-end distributions, or if the market has a quick recovery. But if we don't, I mean, if by the end of the year there are no additional, gains to offset or anything, we'll still be able to take up to $3,000 off our personal income taxes. But let's say it does round trip, and just as quickly like the pandemic, it goes down, but then quickly recovers because maybe peace is announced, and any day now, peace is announced, and all this stops. Yes, you ended up in the same place if you did absolutely nothing. But like I said, you could have a deductible paper loss on your taxes. And then if you are doing even more advanced charitable giving and other things, you might, when it recovers, have the ability now to start donating appreciated assets. There's a lot of benefits to tax loss harvesting as something you do whenever we hit volatility. Plus, I find from an emotional standpoint, it lets me feel like, hey, I'm building something productive even in times where things aren't going great.
I'm going to give you guys a little, this is a trade secret, right? Do you care if I share one of our little secrets? All right. So one of the things that people often say to me as it relates to loss harvesting is, well, I just don't know where the bottom is, right? I want to make sure that I wait, what if this 8.5% loss is the beginning of a 30% down year? And what if I do it too prematurely and I only lock in a small loss? There's nothing that says that you cannot do multiple loss harvests throughout the course of the year. You just have to make sure that you don't run into any wash sale rules. You don't run into any round trip transactions. So make sure if you're thinking through, okay, I have this stable of indices that I like using. Maybe I loss harvest this, and then I take a look 30, 60 days in the future, and I loss harvest again, and then I look 30 to 60 days in the future. It's not an incredibly difficult proposition to stack loss harvesting. It's not just a one and done type endeavor, especially when we see extended periods of market volatility.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon. This might benefit you for 2 years, 3 years in the future. Sure. So pay attention. Now, the last tool that we saved for our tool belt, I feel a little bit like Batman sharing this one, because this one is going to be
I hate when he says that he's Batman.
That means you're Robin.
No,
this is a very valuable tool. Don't try to do, because I almost start chuckling in my head thinking about you and the Robin T-shirt. Go look in the archives for the Robin T-shirt. This is where I wish our video editing we could do on real time where we drop that in. But it is one of those things. Getting back on point, you are a financial mutant. And financial mutants need tools that will help them deal with these type of situations. And one of my favorite is dollar cost averaging.
Absolutely.
Because Bo just said, you heard him when he was talking about tax loss harvesting, is that when markets are going down, we don't know. We always hear the analogy of you're trying to catch a falling knife. Sure. Nobody knows how far things are going. Yes, they're down 8% right now, but maybe we're headed to 30%. We do not know. And no one knows. Don't let them try to dissuade you just because they sound confident with the way they talk about it. So if you don't know something, let's focus on, once again, something you can control. If you set up a behavior where you're buying consistently every month, every 2 weeks, you decide, or every quarter, you decide how consistent or how fast you want to be buying. It's letting you take advantage of and create some little, it's got some huge benefits to your portfolio, but also emotionally,
That's right.
I think you're going to, as a financial mutant, like when you're buying when things are bad. And here's another little thing. If we do hit bear market territory, 20%, you can be opportunistic.
That's
if
right.
you have a lump sum that's getting invested in that less than 10-month period, but all of a sudden the market loses over 20%, there's nothing that says that you can't accelerate your dollar cost averaging. But what I like is for most people who are doing 401ks or you're funding your Roth IRA and you're doing it on a monthly basis, I love that it at least gives you something to help combat that feeling of, man, how much am I losing right now? Because there's going to be a financial mutant side of yourself. It's going to be, hot dog, I'm buying this Friday. The market's beat up. It's off about 10% right now. I'm going to get those shares with essentially a coupon.
You know, it's interesting, Brian. Again, we've been doing content for a long time now. We were dollar cost averaging through the Great Recession, right? Through 2008, 2009. We actually looked at that. I want to say it was 3 or 4 years later. And it was amazing how valuable those dollars were to your overall army of dollar bills. So I would challenge you, if you are someone who's nervous right now and you're thinking, oh man, I just want to start hoarding cash, but you have enough cash on the sidelines, I want to challenge you that 3, 4, 5 years from now, I want you to remember this episode and I want you to look and see what the dollars that you're putting to work for yourself today have turned into. And I think you will be blown away because this does work. We've seen it time and time and time again. If you can learn how to be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful, you can set yourself up for long-term investing success.
Yeah, I mean, use the tools we just covered. I know these times are hard. If, you know, one of the things when we have volatile periods, they're never feel-good moments.
No,
I mean, that's one of the things I can remember, Bo, we started working together in 2008, and it was right as the financial crisis occurred. And I told you, I said, look, bottle up how you feel going through something that's very volatile, very emotional. I don't know if this has reached that level, but it is definitely a learning opportunity that if you don't like how you feel through this and you don't like how your portfolio has handled this, kind of try to reconcile that. Use this as a learning opportunity to get better at the craft of handling your money, being disciplined. Use the resources we've shared. Go check out moneyguy.com/resources, and there's all kind of tools we have on there. I mean, you can use the wealth multiplier to see how valuable every dollar. There's a reason we had this koozie that for a 21-year-old, a dollar could turn into $88 by the time they turn to 66. Pay attention to these things, and you too will know how to deal whenever we have uncertainty, volatility, or things that just give you anxiety. You will get through this.
And here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep loading you guys up with information. You know that one of our very favorite things to do is answer your questions. So right now we have team all around us. They are collecting your questions, putting them in the chat right in front of us because we want to make sure that we're loading you up with the advice and information that you care about, the stuff that will allow you to take your finances to the next level. So if you have a question, make sure that you get it in the chat right now, and let's dive right in. Brian, this first one, I don't want to say I picked him because of the name, but the name was pretty good. This is from Fu, F-O-O, all capitals, Manchu. Fu Manchu. Looking for advice on HSA investments. Currently, I'm 100% equities because we're treating it like an IRA. Now we have a baby on the way, and I'll probably end up tapping it each year. Should I stick to cash? How should I think about my HSA investment? So, Brian, talk a little bit about one. He said something interesting there, turning into an IRA. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about. And then how should you allocate an HSA from an investment standpoint? And does it change depending on life cycle and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, this is a great question. And we love HSAs, just to catch people up when this goes out as a highlight. We love HSAs because they are in that step 5 of the financial order of operations. That's why we love Fu Manchu's name, because it is part of the Fu. Step 5 is tax-free growth. We love that HSAs, just like Roth IRAs, HSAs have the opportunity to grow completely tax-free. And they're triple tax advantage, meaning that when you fund an HSA, it is tax deductible. You get a deduction. It grows tax deferred, meaning that while it's invested, that money is growing. You're not paying taxes on an annual basis. And then if you use it for qualified medical expenses and healthcare, it will be distributed completely tax-free. That's why we say it's triple tax advantage. Now, Fu Manchu had a question here. He said, look, I have been investing. I'm part of the 4%, not the 96% that use this as a clearing account where I put it in, take the tax deduction, but then immediately reimburse myself. Fu Manchu is actually part of the 4% that has invested that money so they can take advantage of all three components of the triple tax advantage. But life's changing. Baby's on the way. So trying to figure out how does this all work with this investing strategy. So I want to back up on something. This is kind of a review course here on using good use of HSAs in investing. Remember, I want your HSA, if you are somebody who knows you're going to use it as a clearing account, there's nothing wrong before you start investing to fill up either, you have to choose, is it the deductible or is it the out-of-pocket maximum for your family? Because realize every health savings account has a requirement. It has to be part of a high-deductible health insurance plan. And those plans, and this is why you have tax savings on your contributions, but also the cost of the premiums, is because more of the responsibilities actually go fall on your shoulders for your health care. So it really turns health insurance into a discount program more than it is a reimbursement program. Because I've been on a health savings account for years. I was going to try to put a date on it, but it's been a number of years now. And I don't think in the last 3 to 4 years, and we have a lot of healthcare expenses. Sure. I don't think I've gotten that much reimbursement whatsoever because you're usually just trying to fill up the deductibles. You're trying to fill up the out-of-pockets. So a lot of it's going to fall on you. So especially if you're having a baby or things like Fu Manchu talked about, more is going to fall on you. And if you can't afford to just collect those receipts, and then reimburse yourself sometime in the future after you've had years of compounding growth, then I would definitely lean into you making that decision on deductibles or out-of-pockets and then invest above and beyond that. Because remember, you are contributing every year to this plan, and hopefully you don't have such high medical expenses that it's wiping out that $7,100 or whatever the family maximum is for you, in the whenever tax year you watch this video. So it is replenishing, but you at least need to have enough money to cover that first year's deductible or out of pocket, whatever your comfort level is.
And I don't think, because Fu Manchu, you mentioned that you've got a baby on the way. I don't think it's crazy to think about altering your HSA strategy depending on your stage of life. Sure. Perhaps you are a young person who didn't have any medical expenses, and so you're just dumping in those HSA dollars. Yeah, get those invested, have an equity side portfolio, have those dollars growing. But then as you start thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to have a family and babies and sniffles and bumps and boo-boos and all that kind of stuff. Okay, maybe I want to shift my allocation, or maybe I do want to have a little more cash in there to cover, exactly like you said, the deductible, out-of-pocket max. It's okay to change. That's one of the beautiful things about finances. It's sort of it's a journey. It's a path that changes based on what's going on in our lives. Fu Manchu, great question, great name, and congratulations on the new baby. That's super awesome.
Ditto.
All right, so this next question is from Catherine. Catherine says, my partner and I are working for 25%, but currently we're only saving 18% into retirement. So she obviously knows we say you ought to save 25%, but she's at 18. We want to buy a house in a few years. Would it be ill-advised to put off the 25% to work towards a down payment? In this housing market, we get this all the time from folks ask us, man, guys, I hear you say I need to be saving 25%, but I want to save for a house, or I'm buying my first home. How do I reconcile those two things? How do I actually get to a down payment, but still focus on saving? Or is it okay to go through seasons where that shifts?
Well, this is why I think it is so powerful the way we handle housing in the financial order of operations that is so different than every other talking head on personal finance out there, is because we're just honest. We get real with you really quick, because especially, the content team knows if you want to get me worked up to where I actually literally go into a closet, pull out a soapbox, and then stand on it and then start just dropping bombs, is that I think it is wrong how hard we have made it for young people to buy that first house. I mean, shame
it's a difficult time
on our leaders and the people making decisions on the fact that what we're doing to, you want to get me on the second thing is education, but we won't even go into student loans right now, but definitely soapbox issue with first houses. I think it is so wrong how we've structured this system, and you're competing against investors at levels where it's subsidized, low interest rates that are even below the mortgage rates that you and I could go get. That's just not the way things are supposed to work. So there's probably a lot of anger with young people, and you're trying to figure out, how do I swim when I feel like the current just keeps pushing me backwards? Because no matter how much I saved this year, if the housing market keeps popping at 10, 15% a year,
I'll never catch it.
I will never be able to catch this thing. So we've tried to create a system that not only takes into account this crazy world we live in right now, but also gives you the grace of expressing what true other financial mutants have done. That's just a secret that's unspoken, because everybody, when you get to success, we love to be on top of our mountaintop and be like, yes, put down that 20% on that first house. That's what all good financial people should be doing. But that's not the reality. We walk the halls of our office. We're 20 plus employees. And I asked, hey, first home, how much you put down? And guess what we found out? The majority, it's actually a very small minority, said 20%. The majority said something like 3%, said 5% on their first home. Now, that's not your second home. That's not when you take your first starter home and you're ready to upgrade. I'm going to tell you, that's when you get to sit on top of your mountain and go, yes, 20%, please. But for your first home, we give you the grace of 3 to 5%. And where that works into the financial order of operations is, step one is you just got to have enough to have your deductibles covered. That's just trying to keep your financial life out of the ditch. Fast forward through steps 2, 3, you get to step 4, which is your emergency reserves. We know that's going to fall somewhere between 3 to 6 months. It's also going to be that 3 to 6 months is also going to encompass, what are your life goals over the next 3 to 5 years with housing, with children and other things? And you're going to expand and contract that emergency reserves based upon those things too. So yes, maybe you don't go from 18 to 25% yet. Maybe you are trying to figure out, you got your 18% going, but you're going to use the grace of that 3% down payment to work that through your emergency reserves. So when you do find that perfect house that's not picked up by BlackRock or some other big commercial investor, you will be able to get it, and through that grace of the 3% down payment, and then you can be on the path to building your wealth and letting your army of dollar bills build for you.
I think for financial mutants and high achievers, we're naturally so goal driven and so motivated. We get frustrated when we're not marching 1,000 miles per hour straight ahead. But there are going to be times in life where maybe you have to like take a pause, or you have to kind of take a little detour. Brian, you've started a number of businesses, and when you started your very first business, you've told me you weren't saving 25% while you're doing that. You were building up cash, preparing to be able to leave the workforce, start your own business. That's okay. I know folks, when they plan on starting a family or buying a house, they can't still do that 20 to 25%. It's okay to take a step back. The true sign of a financial mutant is someone who recognizes, okay, it's okay for me to do that. And then once I do that, once I make that decision, once I get whatever that thing is in place, I work as hard as I can to get back to that 25%. And that's okay. That's okay. I think we're often way too hard on ourselves that, oh man, I got to figure out how to do it all right. That's not the way that your financial life works. You just have to be able to rebound quickly.
So you just said something. I promise I won't go on too much of a sidebar, but writing this book, and I know the book's working, guys. Believe me, every time I bring it up, I'm like, I'm going to open up Pandora's box. But there's a chapter where I talk about missed opportunities, and there were a few years I didn't max out the Roth IRA.
Yep.
And this ties in because I was doing the businesses and other things. And I think the housing could fall into this. I want you guys to know, you do not have to get everything right financially to still end up in a super successful place. And that's what Bo's talking about. The great game of finance is more of a game of horseshoes than it is that you have to ring the bell of hitting that bullseye to thread the needle. And that's the part that you can. And I want you to know that's why we've tried to, when we created the financial order of operations, to put grace moments in there so you knew where you had some additional flexibility to navigate these unique waters, because somebody who built their empire in the 90s is going to be different from somebody in their 2020s.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you've got to make sure that you are creating the system. And I just love that the financial world has enough flexibility, enough ability to flex on you that you can still be tremendously successful, even if you're only batting 300. Because what'd you say? You get in bet 400, so you got to get 4 out of 10, and you get into the Hall of Fame.
You're still getting the Hall of Fame.
So I mean, that's just kind of the way investing is as well. in financial planning.
All right, this next question is from Wholemart 524.
Did you say Wholemart?
Wholemart.
Like a hole, like a pothole?
Like kinda, but without the E.
Or
like,
you shop, this is where you go to buy your holes.
Maybe that's...
Wholemart. Is that what you said? Okay, keep going.
That got a chuckle from Avery. I'll take that. All right, this is what Wholemart said. Should the 3 buckets of investing all have the same mutual funds in the portfolio? So we see this all the time, right? We talk about these 3 buckets. You have your tax-deferred bucket, you have your tax-free bucket, and you have your after-tax bucket. And we say that when you get to financial independence, you want to have all 3 of those funded really, really well, so that you can pick and choose what type of taxes you pay and where your money comes from, and it provides you a lot of flexibility. Well, here's the question that Wholemart is asking. Okay, do I just hold the exact same thing in all 3? So if I'm a 70-30 portfolio, inside of my tax deferred, do I do 70-30? And inside of my tax free, do I do 70-30? And inside of my after tax, do I do 70-30? So that's the first question. And then my second question, Brian, that Wholemart didn't ask, but I just want you to mention it, is do we all need to be thinking about that? Does everybody who's investing, everyone who's like putting money to work, they need to be thinking about what types of holdings they have in which types of accounts?
So Wholemart trying to set a trap. He's like Wile E. Coyote over there. He's over there scraping over a little pine straw on top of to see if I fall into it. Because look, we just did a show, and I would encourage you, if you haven't checked it out, on how to essentially get wealthy without even trying. It was a show on index target retirement funds.
Yep.
And we got a little bit of blowback from people who were like, man, I can't believe you guys are recommending a mutual fund or a target retirement fund and a taxable account. Shame.
How dare you?
Shame. But I want you to know, and Wholemart, maybe you're not, but I'll still go beep beep, because we're going to get through this, and the fact that I do think if you are somebody, because when I saw all the criticism we were getting, because we said just buy an index target retirement fund in everything. I mean, that's kind of the advice we mentioned or talked about on the show, and because there is some tremendous benefit to understanding the 3 bucket strategy and knowing where to put assets. But there's a time and a place.
That's right.
You have to reach the critical mass to where it makes sense to focus your calories, your horsepower on that asset allocation versus how much am I saving right now? Because I'm starting at 0 and I know I want to be at this $1 million, but I've got to get over the hump of 100,000. I got to get over a hump of 200,000 to 500,000. So before we get there, what's the most effective way to get there? And so that's why we were building a bridge of index target retirement funds that the biggest providers of these are like the Vanguards of the world, the Charles Schwab, the Fidelity Investments. Yep. They all offer index funds that as you get older, they're very aggressive while you're young, and then they get more conservative every year, automatic for the people, so you don't have to worry about it. This is why we recommended it. And the reality is when you're young, what are the biggest accounts for your investments? It's going to be your Roth IRA, because we prioritize that in the financial order of operations. It's going to be your employer's plan, because you're getting that free money. Right. You're doing the savings probably in a Roth 401k or something like that. So you're going to see a lot of your assets are in retirement accounts, which mean they have deferred or tax-free implications. So whatever you put in there doesn't matter initially. So that's perfect for the index target retirement funds. On those taxable accounts, now that's where you are going to need your liquidity, but a lot of people will say, but that's also where you could get the taxable distributions from things. But that's going to be your smallest account. It's going to probably be the last thing that gets filled before you get to hyperaccumulation, which is step 7 of the financial order of operations. So that's one of those things where I think in the beginning, yes, I even want you buying an index target retirement fund in that fund until you reach a critical mass point. And here's the thing, we always say it's around 500,000 of investable assets. Now that's taking into account your retirement account, your Roth accounts, and your taxable account. Right. And here's the reality is a lot of you are going to get to 500,000. You're going to find out, you're like, wow, I've got $300,000 in my employer plan. I have $120,000 in my Roth IRA. And I have 80 in my taxable account because, like I said, it unfortunately is one of the last accounts because you're trying to maximize all the benefits that Uncle Sam's giving you on saving. That yes, there might be money in a not the most tax efficient way in a taxable account, but that's okay because that's when you will pivot into the 3 buckets. And now let me answer. Actually, Bo, because I feel like I've talked a lot. Tell them kind of a brief 30,000 foot overview of once you graduate to that critical mass, what are some of the ways you ought to think about your 3 bucket strategy?
Yeah, so once it makes sense for you to begin focusing on this, you've crossed over that critical mass. Inside of your tax-deferred accounts, you want to hold those types of investments that create ordinary income because those accounts are tax-deferred. So if you have bonds or you have fixed income or you have investments that are paying out ordinary income, you want to hold that inside of your pre-tax 401ks, your traditional IRAs, your IRA rollovers. Inside of your Roths, you want to hold your high-flying growth assets because those dollars grow tax-free. So you want to have those investments that you think have the highest probability of outsized returns over the long term because you want to legally stick it to Uncle Sam as hard as you can and grow those tax-free dollars. And then anything that spits off qualified capital gains, qualified distributions, or liquidity, stable value type investments, you want to hold those inside of your after-tax account. And if you can do that, what you're going to find is as your portfolio grows from 500 to 750 to $1 million to 1.5 to 2 to 3, you're going to have a very efficient portfolio. And when you go to start distributing those assets, if you've built your 3 buckets that way, you're even going to be able to distribute the assets efficiently while maintaining your overall asset allocation.
And we would be crazy if we didn't mention this is the brilliance of the abundance cycle.
That's it.
We can give you tons of free advice on all of this stuff, just completely give it away because I had this phone call yesterday with a client where they're like, man, I just want my life simple. And I'm like, isn't that amazing? The more success you have, you can want and desire for life to be simple financially, but complexity, it doesn't matter how good of a hider you are in this great game of simplicity, hide and seek, you will be found by success. And that's where you learn from us, you grow, you keep applying these concepts and you reach a level of success that there we are. We're going to help you out. And that's why when you get to bucket strategies or you're trying to optimize and maximize the opportunity every dollar in your army of dollar bills has, we hope you will remember Abound Wealth, the abundance cycle, and who planted all those seeds. So, like I said, we're the Johnny Appleseeds of millionaires, and we want you to hopefully remember that.
The Johnny Appleseed, did you just make that up?
Yeah, I just came up with that.
The Johnny Apple, let's put that on a t-shirt, team.
This is what happens when we get 3 cups of coffee.
First merch, the Johnny Appleseeds of millionaires. All right, this next question, Brian, is from Phil. Phil says, how does a person in their late 20s, early 30s know when they are retirement rich and to focus more on their 3rd bucket rather than their retirement accounts? Thanks, guys. You're the best. I want you to answer this question, but I want to soapbox this a little bit because I get so frustrated, but frustrated in a kind, loving manner when I have these young folks like, hey, man, I did a projection and I started contributing my 401k and I did a time value of money calculation. And I know that when I turn 65, my 401k is going to have like $4 million in there and I'm retirement rich. And I'm like, dude, you're 25 years old. You're still on like the beginning of your wealth building journey. So often I see young folks who are well-intentioned, young folks who like are thinking about the future, but they get overly focused on the future. They get overly focused on, oh man, I need to think about how I'm allocating my assets for when I'm 65. When realistically, when you're in 20s and 30s, I don't think that ought to be where your focus is. So with that context, Brian, what would you tell Phil about how does someone in their late 20s, early 30s know when they're retirement rich and when should they shift to focus more on their 3rd bucket? And are there any free resources or courses that you could recommend that would help them figure that out?
That part.
No, it was in the question. Phil asked that.
I'm going to start off with the qualitative, and this will go pretty quick, and then pull it back to the quantitative and give some numbers on this. Is that qualitative-wise, I'm just going to tell you, Phil, from my own life, I didn't feel like this was truly an issue until I reached it somewhere in my 40s. From a quantitative standpoint, because this is the biggest thing I want you to be worried about with this, is that it's not a problem in your 20s and 30s if you feel tight on money, because everybody feels tight on money. Just because the Kardashians look like they're having a great time out there, the lion's share of us all struggled in that messy middle of the 20s and 30s. So it is very important. That's why we have the financial order of operations prioritize maximizing every one of the opportunities that the government's providing for us to really exponentially grow and build our army of dollars. But here's the numbers part of this. Like I said, I want to do the quantitative side of this. We know from the financial order of operations, you don't even think about the bucket strategy until you get to step 7. Now realize step 7 is out of a 9-step process. So you're a long ways into the financial order of operations. So what is accomplished in the past means you've already loaded up your Roth IRA. You're already comfortably saving 25% of your gross income before this even becomes a concern for you. And that's really where the answer is. And that's why I tell you, and that's why I want to give the qualitative side, is because I don't want you to hear that and go, man, it's going to be forever before I reach step 7, and you get frustrated with that. I did not feel comfortable with my money to where I could do some of this stuff until I was 42 years of age. And I think that's as self-reflecting as somebody. And look, we don't talk about numbers on the show because I think I don't know, maybe it's my generation, but it is, I'm just telling you, you can have tremendous success, but you have to make sure you focus on what are the things you're wasting your calories or spending and investing your calories on and your horsepower. It's not the 3-bucket strategy if you're in your late 20s and 30s, because there's probably, you need to be getting to the 25%.
That's right.
You need to be making sure that you're building up the emergency reserve so you can get that first house so that you can make it through the health savings account, as well as just then picking up what's left over at your employer plan. That's my advice on it. Retirement rich is a concern you have when you're in your 40s and you can't pay cash for a car, or you're retiring at 55 and you have no way to pay your bills until you reach 59 and a half. Those are those type of things. That's not a 20 or 30-year-old's problem. And I think it goes back to Bo's thing. And this sounds, and it's not supposed to be dismissive, because I don't like it when we give advice that says, you just don't worry about that yet. But I think it's just perspective of somebody who's been there and just saying, make sure you're focusing. Now, if you tell me you've got $2 million already in the account and you're 32 years old,
then you should go to aboundwealth.com
you might already be at step 9 of the financial order of operations, and you should have already called and let the abundance cycle play through. Then we can help with those one-off situations. But for the majority of people, it's not uncommon that you're still comfortably in the messy middle, and you're not going to be able to start worrying about being retirement rich when you're in your 20s and early 30s.
And if you're not quite at that next level stage, I'll tell you 2 things. One, go to our website, moneyguy.com/resources, download our free deliverable so you can keep an eye on those 9 tried and true steps. But if you want a slightly deeper dive, where we talk about some of these nuances, where we go through some of the intricacies that can exist and take place throughout the financial order of operations, go to learn.moneyguy.com and check out our FOO course. And hopefully that will help you stay on the path until you are ready to take the relationship to the next level. This next question, Brian, is from Christian. Christian said, how can I automate my end-of-life wishes so that my loved ones do not have to deal with calling dozens of places to claim life insurance, etc., while they are mourning and stressed? You know, I think this is one of the heavier but possibly more valuable things that we do, Brian. We'll have clients, or we'll have potential clients who reach out and they just lost a loved one, which is like a heavy, stressful, sad thing. And what they recognize is, man, not only are they having to deal with the loss of that loved one, not only are they having to figure out what that means for them long term, they're also having to pick up the pieces of a fairly scattered financial situation. They don't know where the accounts are, who has them, how to get hold of them. So what advice would you give Christian to kind of think through the best way to approach that to prepare his loved ones?
Hey, Christian, first of all, thanks for focusing on this content, because, we don't do a lot of estate planning content because the audience just doesn't care. I think they're just like clients don't. I mean, one of the things that's hardest to talk about is end-of-life decisions. But let me put this in context that I think will be helpful for everybody, even if you have a healthy death fear and other things and you don't like to talk about these things. there is a desire as you start becoming more and more successful is that you're going to crave simplicity. When you're young, I think you crave complexity because you think that's what success is. But as you get older and actually have success, you're not faking it anymore. You really are having success with your finances. You're going to crave simplicity. And I want to encourage you to act on that. I mean, one of the first things that we try to do for clients that become wealth management clients is we consolidate the heck out of their life.
Sure.
Because it's not uncommon for financial mutants to go chasing the best opportunity, the best investment, the best account that's offering unique things. So when you get it as a you get to the point that your life is so complex financially that you reach out to us, we feel like we're herding cats. I mean, so you can imagine we are trained professionals in this. We're trained professional cat herders. You can imagine that if your spouse or loved one had to try to look at all where you've parked all the food for the cats and put cats here and there, they're not trained professionals.
That's right.
So it's going to be very hard. So I commend Christian for wanting to even have this cat herding discussion. But the reality is that the steps we see is consolidation is tremendous. There's a reason we like to bring assets, if you have, IRAs, you have Roth accounts, you have taxable accounts, your 3-bucket strategy. There's nothing wrong with you consolidating those at one of the large brokerage accounts like a Vanguard, a Charles Schwab, or a Fidelity. There's also, just making sure you have documented. We have a great tool. If you go to learn.moneyguy.com, we have the net worth tool that allows you to not only go through and document your net worth statement. That's your inventory, by the way. That's your assets. That's your liabilities. That's your personal balance sheet. That's what a net worth statement is. But here's the brilliance of what, when Bo was designing this template, he put a footnotes page on there. So this is where you can list all the things like your wills, where they're actually kept, the life insurance on your life, but also any special requests that you have out there. Be purposeful of creating a paper trail. And here's something I saw this. I think this is pretty common sense, but I'm always amazed that people don't do this stuff, is that if you do have an executor or a trustee or anybody that's taking over the kids, you're planning on leaving the kids, please make sure you have a discussion while you're alive and also share where this document is. If you're not maybe even go ahead and give them a copy of the executed document so somebody has a record of what your wishes are. All this stuff will help you. The more you educate, the more you consolidate, and the better you communicate this with loved ones, the better you'll be equipped to handle this.
Educate, consolidate, communicate. Did you just make that up on the fly too?
Maybe it's the cup of coffee today.
We got to start getting you 3 cups of coffee. Christian, I echo this. My life is fairly financially complicated. We own a number of businesses. We have a lot of things going on. My wife knows if something were to happen to me, there's 2 things that she does immediately. First is call Brian, because he's a trusted, consigliere for me who can help her navigate. He's a financial professional to be able to do that. And number 2, she knows on the footnotes page of our net worth statement, it has every insurance policy. It has our insurance agent, has the policy numbers, every account number, anything she would need to know about our financial life. She knows where it is and how to get to it. And I think that is hugely valuable.
One update to this, because I've shared this, but it's worth repeating. If you're not using a password management system, I would encourage you, by the way, crooks are getting better and better. So you need to do this anyway. You don't need to have the same passcode on everything. You need to have everything separated out. But what I love about a good passcode management system, a password manager, is that all the good ones allow you to share access with important people. So it goes beyond just the net worth statement where you have an inventory of everything. If you have a good password manager, it also allows your loved one to now also have access to those accounts. You've given them the roadmap with the net worth statement, but if you have a password management and they know how to use it, now they can take that roadmap and actually go to those websites, log into the accounts, have access. It will be a blessing for your loved ones.
Awesome. All right, Brian. This next question is, I don't know if this is French or not. I don't know how to pronounce this.
Oh, this is going to be great then.
But I'm going to call them fee because it's like 2 different words, or it's F-E. That's French for fee, right? Fee? I don't know. And I can't pronounce the last one. It's a bunch of vowels. So this is the question. Does the 4% rule still apply with predicted lower returns, what is a good conservative percentage? 3? First thing I'd like for you to weigh in on, Brian, is your thought on predicted lower returns. I feel like you just have something to say about that. And then let's talk a little bit about safe withdrawal rates and 4%, and does it work, does it not work, and we'll kind of see where this goes.
Is this a question for Brian or Jean-Brion?
Jean-Brion, that's right.
Okay.
It's French for this is for Jean-Brion.
Okay, so it cracks me up. Predicted lower returns. Guys, I pick on, there's a famous financial organization that every year they set headlines. I call them the Borg. They're all, once you've heard me say this, I'm not going to say their name, but you're going to hear me say this, and then you're going to be on the lookout, and you're going to be like, oh my God, there it is. But every year, I can set my clock to it, they have their head of investments come out, and he goes, over the next decade, you better only expect that your portfolio is going to generate 3 to 4% a year. Oh, been doing this.
They've been saying it for the last decade.
This has probably been the last 5 years, and we just came through 2020, 2021, which had double-digit returns all those years. But yet, this stuff really, I think the financial media loves pushing this stuff out there. So it makes sense that this is seeping into some of the questions we receive. But no, I'm just going to go ahead and no. You don't. The 4% rule does not get adjusted by these crazy predicted lower returns that these analysts and the media has been saying for years. And here's why. And let me give you some good news. It's actually 4+ now, because here's the good news. This was all, when you look at the Trinity study and what the safe withdrawal rate of the 4% rule is that when they did the research on this, they said, has there been a period of time where if you looked at just taking 4% for 30 years? Now, look, I will tell you, if you're FIRE, it's a little different, because remember, this is 30 years. And because that's the typical retirement. Somebody was retiring in their 60s, or 50s to 60s, you live to be 80, 90 years old. That's 30 years you're living off of your assets. The 4% rule holds up beautifully. You can even do the 4% with inflation adjustments, where it's actually going up with inflation. You can do 4% plus, whatever your account's growing. So you're getting you can do all kind of cool things. But actually the authors, and I'm just not going to throw their names out because I'll screw it all up because I'm going to leave somebody off. But the authors of the Trinity study and the safe withdrawal rate that brought us the original 4% actually came out in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and said the real number now is over 4.5%. Because as long as you're keeping a 50+% equity allocation, it just doesn't get hurt. Now, I think this is great for somebody in their 20s, their 30s, even early 40s to use as a planning tool. But I will tell you, as somebody who gets into your late 40s, 50s, anybody who's getting within 5 to 7 years of retirement, you might be thinking, hey, this Trinity study and the safe withdrawal rate is great, but what if the next 3 years are just horrible? Or the first 3 years of retirement? Because that is something, there is a risk that what happens if you retire right at the beginning of 2008?
It's hard.
What's the terminology? It's the
sequence of return risk.
Sequence of return risk. Thank you. That's why I love having you on the show. Brought you on specifically so you could fill in those type of things. There is. So we encourage anybody who's 5 to 7 years from thinking they might need to live on these assets, you better stress test your plan.
That's right.
It's one thing to do simple napkin math and figure out if the safe withdrawal rate works for you. It's another to go run it through Monte Carlo simulations to actually build in how often are you buying new cars? How often are you traveling? What are some things that could derail your financial plan? All those things come into play, and that's when we encourage people, use the abundance cycle, come learn, apply. Use all this free advice, but you are going to reach a level of success, and definitely stress testing your retirement plan is one of those value add things that you ought to consider taking the relationship to the next level.
All right, I'm going to summarize to make sure I got I pulled 2 things out of that. So I'm just going to kind of synthesize those. The first is markets should not affect your withdrawal rate over the long term. The length of your retirement or length of your financial independence is what affects the withdrawal rate, right? That's what it affects for, plus or minus, length of time. Second thing is, safe withdrawal rates are used as a metric for modeling and for getting close. But when it actually comes time to retire, there's a different way to approach that to make sure that your dollars can actually last over the long term. Because at certain periods throughout your retirement, you may have a higher withdrawal rate. You may have an 8 or 9% withdrawal rate until a pension starts, or until Social Security kicks in, or until fill in the blank. So it's different, right? So it's a mechanism to use for modeling, but it's not the mechanism to use the day before you retire. Safe assumption?
Yes. And don't forget, Oscar from Sesame Street wants you to know sequence of return risk.
Sequence of return risk. That's right. All right. This next question, everyone in the room right now is going to get mad at me because this has nothing to do with finances, but I don't care because I know you want to answer this question and I'm in control right now. This is from Silver. Silver said, not a financial question. What kind of smoker does Brian have? I was rewatching old episodes and heard him mention he was smoking a brisket for neighbors. Now, I happen to know you are a meat smoking aficionado, so I just want to give you the floor to talk a little bit about what you use and what tools you found that have made it useful for you over the last couple of years. You've been an expert.
Yeah, we actually, because we didn't want to mess up the algorithm. So,
That's
but there
right.
was a time when we first started doing this whole YouTube thing, because the Tesla videos did so well. We were like, you know what other videos do well? Barbecue, smoking meat.
Videos.
You know, I bet I could do, because I'm pretty proud of my brisket skills. I've even had neighbors. I've wondered, would I have been invited to that party
If you didn't bring a brisket.
if they didn't go with me to Costco? We buy the brisket and then I prepare the brisket, and then I was essentially the caterer for their party. But I use an extra large big green egg.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the thing: all my neighbors have these pellet smokers,
Right.
and they work incredibly well. And here's the thing that's frustrating to me. And my neighbors, I hope they, I don't think my wife doesn't watch the content, so hopefully my neighbors don't watch the content. But it is frustrating that I had developed this skill set over many years of making awesome brisket, where you prepare it, you rub it down, put all the dry rubs on it, you set it on the grill around 11 o'clock at night, and you don't come back till, hours on end the next day to it, and you have to tend to the fire and so forth. But my neighbor, one of my neighbors had me over to have ribs. This is not too many months ago, and it was just glorious how good these ribs were. And he turned it on with his mobile app, and he told me, he sent me. I was like, this seems wrong. But I also know that this is part of what happens with technology, is that things get easier. I mean, these pellet smokers, it's not like you have to go tend the fire to stoke it, because the thing with a big green egg, as anybody knows, you either have these like where you're using sawdust type pellets that are soaked in something that essentially start the fire, and then you have to sit there and practically blow on it. I even have the old thing, you would think I was running a locomotive where I'm blowing smoke on this thing, or you can plug it in this thing that heats up to the point that it sets the charcoal on fire. My neighbor, he just plugs it in the wall.
And that's
it's
all
an
it
electric smoker. And if you want, they have different pellets of different flavors, and they really work. So like my mom's husband, he knows I'm big into smoking meat, and he was, for Christmas, he was like, which one should I be asking for? Should I get a small green egg like you had? And it broke my heart, because I do think if you're very serious, I still love what the ceramic cookers do, because it's just incredible how they circulate the airflow and how moist the meat is through it. But if you're somebody who's just going to dabble in this, but you want good smoked meat, I did have to give the recommendation to my relative to go buy an electric smoker, because they're just easier to deal with, unless you really want to focus on the craft. But the technology's gotten so good. And what's funny is, I'm in this mastermind group, and there's some restaurant owners in there. Yeah. They have the ceramic, but they all use the electric smokers because it's just so consistent. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And for restaurant quality, you want consistency. So at their house, on their previous food trucks and other things, they were using these electric smokers because it's just
it actually works.
Consistent.
And
it's easy. You can get the same result every time. Whereas that's not always the case when you're doing the old fashioned grill. So I didn't mean to give you 4 minutes of me talking about.
That was great.
I
I don't know if that'll actually be a highlight, but if you are in the live stream right now, you just got a special treat, because I don't know that one actually makes it out of here.
So here's one thing though. I will tell people on briskets that I found, because I've done wrapped in tinfoil, I've done wrapped in butcher paper, I've done unwrapped. I just leave it. I just leave it wrapped in. I mean, I leave it exposed the entire time.
All right.
Because there's a whole group of school out there that think that you're supposed to, after the meat starts settling down, to go wrap it. I found that it's just so much easier to set it and forget it, and just don't take a peekaboo under the grill.
Love it. All right, here we go. Let's do our next question. Everything good on the sound? You guys good over there? Awesome. All right, here we go.
I did see like a hive action over there.
I know, they started moving. They started moving a lot. Made me super nervous.
Is that because I will tell you, for the first time, I feel like I've kicked my mic cord like 4 times. I don't know, but never mind. Keep going.
All right, here we go. This is the next question. This one is financial. This is from Curtis. Curtis said, does it make sense to contribute to your 401k if there is no match, but all other bases have covered? For reference, I'm saving 30% of my net pay overall, maxing out Roth, and contributing to an individual account. So we know, Brian, not all 401ks are created equal. Some of them have very poor investment options. They're poorly diversified. They have really expensive internal operating expenses. So if that's the case, I have one of those 401ks and I don't get any match, right? I don't get any free money. Should I just avoid it altogether? Or are there reasons, or are there times when I should still even utilize a 401k because the nature of the type of account that it is?
Curtis, this is once again, I love that with the financial order of operations, it's very confirming for me when once again, you throw a curveball of for most 401ks, your employer's going to give you 50 cents on the dollar or dollar for dollar matching. Curtis throws us the curveball of his employer. I don't know if his golf buddy or whoever designed this thing wasn't fully maximizing it. It just exists. It doesn't give all the benefits. Does this blow everything up? That's why I love that the financial order of operations is kind of an all-terrain vehicle. Mm-hmm. It doesn't care, because let's look at this. I'm holding up the resource. You can go to moneyguy.com/resources. This is the free deliverable. This is not, now if you want the course, the full deep dive, it's learn.moneyguy.com. But you'll notice step 1, deductibles covered. Step 2, employer match. Well, look, there's no employer match on this plan. Just pass on through. Just drive right on over step 2. You get to 3, high interest debt. We want to knock out the credit cards, anything else like that. Emergency reserves, Roth and HSA. This is primarily talking about your IRA version of the Roth, but it does. 5 and 6 are very much connected, because step 6 of the financial order of operations is max out retirement. Now, what if you're an employer plan? Yes, it doesn't have a match, but what if they offer a Roth tax-free option in that Roth 401k? My goodness, still take advantage of it, because that's a tremendous tax-free saving opportunity. If you're in your 20s or 30s, your 50 and 60-year-old self will want to give you the biggest, sloppiest bear hug with, wet tears on your shoulder dripping down because you're so excited for yourself. Don't miss out just because your employer has not maximized the opportunity. It's the same thing, because he brought up, what if there's no match? We have plans that come our way where they're just not great funds. The investment choices are below what we'd like. You don't have index funds. You don't have good diversification options. That advice still holds up if the power of the financial order of operations, you got to take advantage of all the government incentives that have been put out there to create your financial success. Yeah,
maybe you're someone who's in a higher tax bracket. You're a higher income person, but the company doesn't have a fantastic 401k. If every dollar you put in the pre-tax portion of your 401k will save you 25, 30, 35% in taxes, man, that'll cover a lot of poor fees or a lot of poor investment returns. So what I would argue that you ought to do is, if you're on one of those plans that's not fantastic, be an advocate for your own change. Talk to your employer, talk to your supervisor, talk to your manager. Say, hey, what can we do to get some low-cost index funds? What can we do to go to a low-cost provider? What can we do to add Roth 401k option? And you may be amazed that it's just been out of sight, out of mind. They haven't thought about it, haven't put any time into it. And you say, you know what, I'd love for us to have a better 401k, and I'll spearhead the initiative. You might be amazed that you can be the change agent that changes it for yourself as well as for all of your colleagues as well.
Yeah, I had a friend ask me, because their spouse gets their check refunded to them every year. Because, the way the plans, anybody who's highly compensated, you want to do a salary deferral, but at the end of the year, you get a check coming. I'm always like, why? go to a safe harbor plan. Maybe your employer has not modernized. They're still under the old, traditional rules that required that, highly compensated after you fail the testing. There are new modern plans that will allow you to maximize. Be an advocate, just like Bo shared, for your plan, because maybe your employer just doesn't know any better. There are, just like America is not very good with being a financial mutant and understanding. We know 80% of the public is horrible with their personal finances. Unfortunately, your boss might be one of that 80%. Even though they might have a lot of income coming in, doesn't mean they're good with money. You could be the agent of change that helps that.
I love it. Love it. All right, Brian, this next question is from Tim. Now, this is a little weedy, and we can't give specific advice, but I think this is like good planning to talk about. Tim said, does it make sense for an elderly parent to convert any of a $200,000 IRA to a Roth? They're only taking minimum distributions since the money isn't needed. Is an IRA treated better at death from a tax standpoint? So this obviously has an elderly parent, has plenty of money, living off of Social Security or pensions or fill in the blank. And the question is even if I don't need the dollars, is there value in doing Roth conversions? Is that something I should be thinking about? And if so, what are the benefits of those? Why might I want to do Roth conversions, even if I'm not pulling off those dollars?
So I often think about the fact that I look at Roth planning as somewhat of a donut hole strategy. And the fact that, look, it's a no-brainer for young people because young people, you're getting that tax-free growth, and you see my koozie, $1 for a 21-year-old can turn into 88 by the time you retire at 65. Imagine if $87 of that 88 is completely tax-free from our favorite taxing uncle. So it's a no-brainer for young people. But you do see this weird thing in the Middle Ages when you're in your peak earning years of, so let's say your 40s, even early 50s, where you'll see, where you're in the highest marginal tax bracket, where it does make sense to maybe you don't load up. First of all, the government might not let you load it up if you're talking about Roth IRAs, but you choose even in your 401k at work, maybe you're choosing the traditional because the tax savings, because maybe you live in California where they're taxing you at 13% plus the federal at 37, 50 cents out of every dollar you earn is going to taxes. It makes sense to then maybe you want the traditional side. But here's why I say this is a donut hole. Something happens when you get older because the Roth can be a tremendous estate planning tool. And let me explain. First of all, Roth IRAs don't have required minimum distribution rules. So you're going to find that one of the sad things about being a great accumulator and taking advantage of all the tax-free growth from your employer with the matching and all the compounding growth that's been going on in your retirement accounts is that when you reach 72, used to be 70 and a half, but they've changed it to 72.
You got to start pulling it out.
You got to start pulling it out and you're going to start paying income taxes on it. Well, Roth IRAs don't have that requirement. Well, then we know with part of, I think it was the CARES Act, changed the rules to where now essentially you could stretch an IRA to go over the life expectancy of the beneficiary. A lot of that went away, and we were worried, oh my goodness, are they going to do away with the benefit of Roth IRAs and so forth? No, once again, they put a 10-year rule on that your beneficiaries have to pull that money out 10 years in the future. Well, imagine, fast forward, we know 10 years is a long time for compounding growth to work. Your beneficiaries inherited a Roth asset 10 years in the future. They can let that grow completely tax-free and then pull the money out 10 years in the future. It's going to be a good bit higher. So by all means, Tim, look, we don't know your personal situation, so we have to give the disclaimer. We don't give personal advice on here, but just give you a mindset of all the variables to think about. There is definitely a time and a place for somebody who is thinking about, and it's going to take into account also, where's their income at? There's a lot of variables I can't cover just by doing a personal finance show, but there's definitely a place for that to be part of the consideration.
Now, the one caveat, and you sort of alluded to this, be careful though, right? Because there are some wires you can trip over when it comes to Roth conversions. You might trigger Social Security becoming more taxable than it was previously. You might run over Medicare surcharge limits. So you just want to make sure that before you make a big decision like that, you understand all the unintended consequences that decision may have. But I think for a number of our retired clients, we still implement this strategy.
Bad businessman Bo just showed up.
Well, I didn't want to.
Abundance cycle. By the way, this is complicated stuff. Maybe you need to take the relationship to the next level to get specific advice. So don't overlook. Go to aboundwealth.com, moneyguy.com. We have a work with us segment. We can turn it into specialized advice.
All right, here we go. This next question is from Britton. Britton said, and I think we hear this pretty frequently too. Can y'all speak to investment strategies when your employer does not offer benefits? Meaning I don't have a 401k. Currently, I'm maxing the Roth and using after-tax brokerage account. Is that wise? I feel like the financial industry has done folks a disservice as it relates to this question. Because all the time we'll work with clients that when they were in their younger years, early on in their career, starting out, they maxed out their Roth IRA and they either didn't have a 401k plan, or maybe they were maxing out the 401k plan, and a financial professional came along and said, hey, you know what you need to do? I have a product you need to buy. I've got this life insurance product or this annuity product or this, fill in the blank. Is that the right answer? Is that the thing that people should use to start building wealth? Or would you tell Britton, hey, even if you don't have a 401k, IRAs and after-tax accounts are okay? Anything that you would speak into that?
I think Britton, first of all, needs to be praised. Mm-hmm. I mean, how often, I got to tell you, one of the things that drives me crazy, Bo, and you've talked about this with people, you read a book like The Wealthy Barber or something else like that, or Millionaire Next Door, or hopefully my book whenever it comes out in the future, where you get so excited and you start saving, but you're only making $50,000 a year when you started, this excitement, but now you're making $100,000, but all you're doing is maxing out your Roth IRA, and that's always a problem. So a lot of people just stop. They do the Roth IRA because they get excited about it, and then they don't ever go to what's next after that. Britton already sounds like she went ahead and is doing after-tax savings in a brokerage account. Kudos for going ahead and building that bridge up. But it is one of those things where I think a lot of the public is got it where you start pushing products and other things. I think there is absolutely nothing wrong after you get past that Roth IRA. And once again, it fits nicely into the financial order of operations. There's nothing that says that hyperaccumulation, meaning the goal of reaching 25% of your gross income, can't be in just Roth IRA and then after tax.
That's right.
Because that after tax still has a lot of tax benefits. I mean, you think about the fact that dividends, capital gains are tax favored. It's going to be okay. And plus you have access to more liquidity. So that's going to help you if you go on to do, other type of investments that you need access to liquidity, like real estate and so forth. So there are some tremendous benefits to even that strategy, Britton. We always get caught up in 401ks, 403bs, and beyond just because they are out there. And since the government's incentivizing that saving strategy, we tend to talk a lot about it. But there's nothing wrong with what you're doing as well.
But Brian, it sounds so simple, right? Like I can just do a Roth IRA and I can just do an after-tax. Yeah, it is really simple. And that's what I think is so frustrating in the financial world, especially right now, is that building wealth is and can be incredibly simple. It's the whole reason we synthesize this 9-step financial order of operations to make it simple. Now, it's not easy because it requires behavioral change and it requires discipline and it requires forethought and it requires planning. But the actual X's and O's, blocking and tackling of it, is not incredibly complicated, and I feel like often we are our own worst enemies by introducing complication when we shouldn't. If all you can do is take some money and save 25% of your gross income and throw it into low-cost index funds or a low-cost target retirement index fund, odds are you are going to be financially successful if you can do that over a long period of time. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot more complicated than that.
When people make stuff complicated, my spidey senses tell me they're trying to sell me something.
That's right.
Because they're trying to spin your head, get you so discombobulated you don't even know where you are. So then you'll be more subjective to being able to be, pushed over into buying something maybe you don't need.
All right, Brian, this next question, this is from Michael. Oh, this is beautiful. Sometimes it's like I do this on purpose, but I don't.
You're a trained professional.
Maybe that's what. Sometimes it's just like I'm a professional. All right, this one's from Michael.
Maybe you're just lucky.
Or maybe I'm just lucky. It seems like now is a poor time to be investing in index funds. Is it better to be investing in solid companies with proven earnings that won't take a tumble if they miss earnings in a downturn? It seems like now is a poor time to be investing in index funds. Is it better to invest in solid companies with proven earnings that won't take a tumble if they miss earnings in a downturn? Given all the stuff going on right now, Brian, should we switch our investment strategy to strictly and exclusively and solely individual companies, individual stocks?
I can see how there's a lot of temptation, especially if you go and you look at some of these tech stocks and the way they've been on just a roll, exponential growth in a very short period of time. I mean, man, it looks like it's chasing the white dot is what I call it, the white hot dot.
The white hot dot.
The white hot dot, because, you know, you see it. And by the way, this isn't a new thing. You know, I used to do episodes, since we've been doing this since 2006, we used to, when publications were more important, Kiplinger's used to, a big personal finance magazine used to have an annual report of the best performing mutual funds. And I used to say, no, be careful of going and buying that issue and then buying the first, stock or mutual fund, whatever was listed on their list. Because, man, about the time you buy it, it's about the time it's probably not going to do anything. I always think about, what can you control? We just did an entire show on a lot of world events and other things, and it just chaos everywhere. And you have to focus on what can you control and what behaviors, and then how valuable is your time? Because, I mean, this is a resource, your time, the calories you can burn, the horsepower of your brain that can be spent on the wealth building process. If you buy the company, because, you know, I see all the time people post, you know, if you put $1,000 in Amazon, you'd be worth $75 million. I made that up, you know, because this is the type of crazy stuff people put out there. And I think that is more of a distraction than a resource, because it's just, the reality is that people get excited about stocks, and maybe you're right, you know, especially companies like Apple and so forth that have done well for going on over a decade now. But maybe you're wrong. I mean, like, is this whole thing with what used to be Facebook and is now Meta, is this going to be just a short duration thing, or is this going to be where, because by the way, back in the 90s when I first started managing money, the company you want to own was Coca-Cola. Because Coca-Cola, man, how could they do any wrong? I mean, that was a household brand. They had the great Christmas commercials every year. Everybody, I mean, when you come to look at Abound Wealth, we have a fridge full of flavored waters. Back in the 90s, it wasn't flavored waters. It was all the different soft drinks that you were drinking 4 or 5 of them a day because you were so excited. You know, but then if you invested in Coca-Cola at the time, you know, people were surprised that Coca-Cola went through a decade where all of a sudden they didn't make money. I mean, it just, the stock price was sitting at the exact same place it was. Now, yes, they had dividends and other things, but it was like, how could this awesome stock that it's done great for all these years, GE, General Electric, now you guys are like, that's an old school guy. I'm telling you guys, early in the 90s and early 2000s, you'd be like, GE is the greatest investment. I don't even have to go buy a mutual fund, just go buy General Electric. What I'm telling you, and those are the companies that are still around. What if I threw out the whole Lucent Technologies, WorldComs, Enrons?
Was it grocerystore.com?
I mean, the web grocer or whatever. But all these companies that just seem like, man, these things are awesome and spectacular, and then they burn out and then they fizzle out, and you're like, you don't even remember these companies anymore. And that's why I don't like to see people in the wealth building process get so distracted. This is going to be, we're going to get troll comments. Does this guy just wander in the woods? Yes, it's a Q&A show, so I wander in the woods as I'm trying to teach these concepts. I remember when I first started managing money, I was so excited about these separate account managers that would go out there and buy your clients like a full basket of all these individual stocks. And I was so, even my parents don't have money that, you know, but my dad had an IRA with $105,000 in it. And the minimum to get into this separate account manager was $100,000. So, you know, sure enough, without knowing what the heck I was getting into, threw my dad's, you know, IRA account into this. And I'll never forget him calling me all the time, be like, hey, what's up with this? I keep getting all this paperwork in the mail, and then what's this company? I got 5 shares of this, and I found that he was getting distracted with what the behavior or what the stock performance of that one stock was, instead of focusing on the behavior of saving more money for the future. Now, you're basically setting a table at Thanksgiving for this stock that you've now turned into kind of an idol in your portfolio life. I'm telling you, focus on the behavior of saving more. Index funds protect you from all of that stuff. All you have to count on is that I know automation, technology, and other things are going to create this great, big, beautiful tomorrow where the economy is going to continue to expand and grow the pizza pie of our economy. Why try to outsmart it when we know index funds, if you especially go 10, 15 years in the future, they outperform like 80 to 85% of the other active managers. If they're outperforming active managers that are paid 7 figures to try to outperform, what makes you think, you without the CFA, you without any training, what they're going to navigate this well? I'm saying just go buy the index fund. Because even if you're like you want to write love letters to Elon Musk because you love Tesla, if you buy the S&P 500, you own a big chunk of Tesla.
Yep.
And that's why I'm saying don't waste your energy. Don't waste the calories. Don't waste the horsepower. Go buy the index fund and then focus on how you're going to go make more money, better yourself to get yourself to the best version of yourself financially. I don't, that was 6 minutes of a bunch of rambling. Maybe you could have concisely done that, but I felt like it was needed.
No, I thought it was wonderful. We love diversification because we love probabilities. We like putting ourselves on the right side of majority or high probability outcomes. We have a horrible sense of survivorship bias when it comes to investing because we remember the Amazons and we remember the Googles and we remember the Teslas, but we forget all of the other ones that you mentioned. And we have no way of knowing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, which one of those companies are going to be the ones that outperformed and which ones weren't. But if we buy a well-diversified basket of goods, we're setting ourselves up on the high probability of success that the markets in general are going to go up. And we think that's a prudent way to approach.
I did want to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Because you had said poor time right now. There's a lot of value to that word, poor time right now. I have a challenge to that. I want, Michael to go back and look at 10 years ago, just the S&P 500 and what it was trading at and so forth. Is that it's always going to look like a poor time in some aspects. 2 out of every 10 years, the market's going down.
Sure.
But if you fast forward 10 years, it's going to look like a great time. I mean, I'm telling you, don't let the pothole of what's going on in the geopolitical or the world right now derail you from creating great financial decisions in the long term.
Guys, we love getting to answer your questions. If you haven't had a chance to go check out the website, go to moneyguy.com/resources. Go check out our course, learn.moneyguy.com. You can also grab our net worth tool there. We're going to keep loading you guys up. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of your financial journey.
I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen. Money Guy team, out.
Those finger guns?
Yeah. Well, they were more like drums.